Happy to bring on this next guest. We haven't talked to him yet in season here this year. Tyler Sawa, the host of the Pride podcast. Good stuff on the Lions, and we've got to talk some Lions. We talked to him from the Rams side here with Brock Vieira, but now we've got to talk from the Lions side. I'm curious, Tyler, what stuck out to you with the last game and the season so far here, because there's certainly some narratives that we've seen, but I haven't talked to you over the course of this season, so I'm curious what's caught your eye the most here.
Yeah, so the last game, to me, it kind of went as expected, honestly. I thought there'd be a dogfight game, but a game where they probably ultimately, come up short, and I just feel like that's just kind of been the team we've seen this year from the Detroit Lions, right? Like, they are a scrappy team, they are a good team, but they are not once the juggernaut that they were last year or even maybe 2 years ago, with all the adjustment that's been going on with the coaching staff, some personnel issues. So, I mean, it's tough right now, man. Like I said, I think it's a good football team. I don't think it's a great football team. It's just kind of where I sit right now, and I thought last Sunday was a great example where they are. The Rams are a great football team, and, they showed on Sunday that they are a more superior team over the Lions right now, and, I think the results showed that last Sunday.
It's interesting because we had Brock Vieira from Rams on SI on before you, and he was really under the impression I guess he was kind of putting the Lions over to a degree. He was under the impression that the Lions really should have won that game. That was an interesting standpoint from especially an opposing team's beat writer. But I was kind of with you. It seemed like they played a more complete game. We were talking with Brock about that. I think one of the differences between this year and the last couple, especially last year, is the physicality advantage doesn't seem to be going to the Lions quite as much. They are a very physical team. That could be one of the many reasons that contributes to the fact that they do get broken down a little bit. They do have some of the injury issues because they compete so hard in practice and all of that. Not that all the teams don't, but there is a higher percentage of some of these things with the Lions. But they just don't seem to have that same physicality advantage where they're wearing the other teams down as the game goes on. It's more so it's kind of even, and if one team is getting worn down, it's sometimes the Lions, which I think was the case with that Rams game.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Something that the Lions used to, I think, take a lot of pride in on both sides of the ball was the trenches. I mean, they were never a great pass rush team under this regime, or it feels like a really long time, right? But they were really stout at stopping the run game. It felt like every week it didn't really matter who the matchup was. It didn't matter how hot the running back was or how good that offensive line was playing. One thing the Lions were always great at was stopping the run, and just feels like this year when they play against a good offensive line, it just feels like you said, like they're just not the dominant team that we're used to seeing from last year. And I don't know if that's an adjustment with defensive coordinators, but it just seems like on both sides of the ball. And, going back to the offensive side of the ball, too, it's like losing Frank Ragnow. You're just seeing the offensive line play is just not as dominant as it once was. And I think that's why you're seeing a little bit of a regression with this team. Like, it's still a good football team. They still have a lot of talented players. I mean, it's not like all hell's broken loose with this football team. But when you look at the physicality and at the trenches from both sides, it's just not as dominant as it was a year ago or even two.
You mentioned the defensive injuries and some of the people missing, it contributing to that physicality. That's been one of the interesting storylines to me, because obviously the injuries have been a little bit more concentrated this year, still on the defense for the most part. Laporta was a huge injury, and they've had some other ones on offense, but it's primarily at tight end. But the defense is what's been hit hard, and specifically the defensive backfield. That's where most of the injuries have gotten concentrated into a couple line injuries. But thankfully the linebackers have been pretty healthy and played very nicely as a unit. But the part last year, I remember last year, it was kind of like you didn't know when the tipping point was going to happen, because there were all these injuries, but they just kept continuing on, and they were losing huge players. They were losing Hutch and McNeil and all these key players, and they just kept going. And then it seemed like the Anzalone injury, not that it was solely about him, but it seemed like that was kind of the tipping point. And once he went out, then the defense really took a step back. They were already retreating a little bit because, like you said, they also had the coordinator change and they were trying to work in a lot of new personnel this year. But I actually think that some of these defensive backs have acquitted themselves well, yet the thinning out, especially on the back end, because you're losing Joseph, who's your ball hawk, and you can isolate a little bit more in the defensive backfield, and Branch, who that's one of the elements that I think is kind of underrated about missing these guys from the defensive backfield is two in particular. Branch and Arnold have been, you could say what you want about Arnold, but he's been pretty stout in run support, as has Branch, and obviously he blitzes, he does a lot of different things for him, but it seems like we're seeing it at that side too, and then the guys that are out there aren't maybe necessarily particularly healthy, like a DJ Reed.
Yeah, no, I think you assessed it really well right there. I mean, Brian Branch in particular, right? Like, I've always said it, I think he is, if not the most important defensive player out there, the second most important defensive player out there, because, usually you give the edge to like an edge rusher, maybe a nice interior defensive lineman. But, I think like after Aiden Hutchinson, like the most important player for this defense, especially this defense, that has Brian Branch kind of be that Swiss Army knife that he can do whatever he really wants. If it is go blitz, if it is go play coverage, like, he was so important to this team, and, losing him, during this stretch run, and, you're going to probably lose him for some parts of next year as well. Like, just a big major loss. And like you mentioned with Kirby Joseph, like, he's now been out for, what has it been, over 2 months now? He hasn't played since the Kansas City Chiefs game. Yeah, it's been a blow, and you're seeing, it is hard to adjust when you don't have your main guys out there. And, Shep too, first time coordinator, like, it's tough, man. There's a lot on his plate to kind of fix it, and when you don't have your main core of guys, I think it makes it a lot tougher. But like you said last year, it's like they kind of just kept chugging along. It's like, man, when are they going to fall apart? And then you finally saw it in the playoff game versus Washington. This year just a little different, man. Everything's just been a little harder. Like I said, I still think they're a good football team, but it's not as easy as it once was last year when they kind of had everything all clicking.
Exactly. And I don't want this to be all doom and gloom, because I feel like, I'm the one that started the tone of it, but I still think they could make a run. That the one advantage of what's going on here is, although they may not have the prowess that they have had the last couple years, I would say that although there are some clear-cut teams towards the top, like the Rams, the Seahawks, who are going to battle here in minutes for maybe the division title over there, or at least to get some pieces there. San Francisco is still playing well. That whole NFC West, aside from Arizona, is playing very well. But it seems a little bit more wide open this year with some of these new emerging folks, like the Seahawks. The Rams kind of bounced back to more of an effect than I think most thought. Same with the 49ers. But it's still a little bit more wide open on both the AFC and the NFC side. So you could see if they could kind of channel some of the stuff from last year. But I'm with you. I think the Branch thing was what kind of took the air out of my sails to a degree. I could see overcoming the Joseph injury maybe, although that would be a very tough one. But then to go from, okay, you have Branch, and then you maybe get Joseph back, to now we don't have Branch for sure, and Joseph isn't likely to contribute in a meaningful way here the rest of the year. That was a tough blow, but it is pretty impressive at what they've been able to cobble together, because I said this to Brock, but one of the things that we're losing track of with kind of the defense and some of the lacking and the problems there is the fact that the offense is playing very well, especially once Campbell put it back in his hands.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to kind of go back to your playoff point right now. And I think it's a great point. Like, all the Lions need to do right now in these next 3 games is take care of business, and let the rest figure it out. Like, yes, you don't technically control your own destiny, but if you go out there and win out, you have a pretty damn good shot of making the playoffs. So it's kind of just get in. And like you mentioned, like, there's not many juggernauts, right? Like, even the Rams, like, I think a lot of people consider them the best team in the NFC, if not the best team in the NFL right now, just the way they've looked so far. And you saw a clear example last Sunday. Like, they are a team that plays a good brand of football, but if you play like how the Lions played for the first half and, could do that for a 4-quarter game, like, this is a team that is beatable to a certain extent. It's a tough game. You have to play a damn near perfect game to beat them. But, like, in the playoffs, everything's on the table. It's one game. Anything could happen. So the Lions' biggest mission for these next 3 games has to, just get in. I mean, division's going to be tough at this point right now with some of the big division losses. But just get in and see what you could do and see what the season still is. Because, like you mentioned, like, as poor as it looks at some points, and like, you're sitting at 8-6, it doesn't look great, but it's not terrible. This is an opportunity for them to go out there and take advantage of the situation and, go get hot and go see what you could do in the postseason. But yeah, I mean, the offense, we've seen it the last, couple of weeks. I feel like they kind of got their offensive line, it kind of intact now, right? Like, I think they're kind of finally adjusting. It's not as dominant as it once was, and you're not going to get that this year with these group of guys. But I feel like once Coyote Oshika went out, and they've been kind of doing the Tristan Colon and Miles Frazier, and it looks like he might be getting Mahogany back as soon as this upcoming Sunday, I feel like the offensive line play has been a lot better recently, and you're seeing a more confident Jared Goff. And when he's playing confident, he's protected, that's when this offense is clicking. That's when you see the Amon-Ra St. Brown, you see the Jameson Williams get involved, and, now you're seeing a little bit more Jahmyr Gibbs involved in the passing game. So the offense is clicking right now for the most part. So if they could just keep it going for these next 3 games, get the offensive line playing right, keep Jared Goff clean, I don't see why this offense can't keep clicking the rest of the way.
And I think that's worth mentioning and important to kind of emphasize the positive side of, because although we're used to this offense working very well, especially under Ben Johnson the last couple seasons, they scuffled a little bit at the beginning of the season. They had some individual performances that were very good. They weren't clicking quite the same way. Laporta was having a great year. I think kind of an underrated year before he went out. Then he goes out. The tight end group is decimated. Campbell ends up taking over. And quietly, with kind of this, with missing one of the better players for this year, with this kind of makeshift, as you referenced, offensive line, they're doing a very impressive job, both from a play calling standpoint and getting a feel for that from his side of things, and kind of maybe because to go back to it after basically passing it over to Ben Johnson a couple years ago, it's impressive how well he's found the flow again with what is an impressive unit of offensive pieces, but still down a couple of key pieces. And like you said, working with a makeshift offensive line that isn't the strength that it was in previous years, although they're trying to build back up to it.
Yeah, 100%. I think right now that you're kind of seeing that kind of missing this offense is like the Sam Laporta, even like a Brock Wright. I think he was a guy that was, being not one of Jared Goff's favorite targets, but like, he's a reliable guy, especially when Laporta was out. And, at the moment right now, you don't have either of them. And I just feel like the Lions are kind of missing that third guy. Like, what you're going to get out of Amon-Ra St. Brown every Sunday. What you're going to get out of Jameson Williams for the most part every Sunday. I just feel like they're missing that third target right now. And I'm kind of waiting for one of these dudes to emerge. I feel like everyone was kind of expecting to hopefully be Tesla, right? Because, they had put some resources into him and traded a couple picks to get him in the 3rd round. And, you have a guy like Khalif Raymond, who is always, a steady, solid option. But, I think if the Lions could really get another good third option for Jared Goff, and hopefully it comes this year, right? Because I'm not worried about the long term, but more of this year. This already good offense, I think, could really take a next step, because the one problem with this offense is sometimes you see it stall out a little bit. And you saw it last game versus the Rams was a prime example of that. Like, they were playing dominant in that first half, had a good control of this game. But when you start stalling out a little bit, you just don't have the defense to really rely on. And your offense has to almost be perfect every single game if you want to go out there and, beat these good teams, especially if we're talking about potentially playing January football.
I still think it could be to Sla. I think his holdup has been the fact that he hasn't necessarily gotten all the way through the different formations, and I think he's kind of, I can't say played himself off the field, but hasn't necessarily played himself onto the field with picking up all the nuances of the offense, which is tough, and he can only get so many reps in practice and look at them so many times and try to memorize them. But he's a local guy here, everybody's following him, and I think obviously he's made some highlight reel plays when he's been in there, and he is, I mean, if you watch him, he is getting open in a lot of his routes. It's just the idea that it kind of looks like it mirrors a little bit early Goff and early JMO, where it was just like they weren't quite on the same page. And I think that's to Slot to a degree because this is built on precision. Goff loves a precise wide receiver, which is why he gets along with St. Brown so well. JMO has gotten a lot better in that category, especially this last season here. And I think Tesla will get there, but like you said, it's a matter of, does he need another full off season to do that, or can it kind of come together as we're approaching the playoff run here?
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, Ryan. I feel like even back in the LA days or St. Louis days when Goff was there, right? Like it always did take a bit of a minute for him to get it adjusted with those big X receivers or just those outside receivers in general. Like he's always loved the slot receivers or the tight ends, and we've seen a prime example of that just in Detroit, right? With Sam Laporta since he's been here, obviously Amon-Ra St. Brown, since he's been here. And then even when he was with the Rams, you saw it a lot with Tyler Higbee and Cooper Kupp at that time. So, like, those are usually his type of guys. And it does take a little bit of a minute to get the Jameson Williams, or in the Rams' perspective, the Robert Woods or the Brandon Cooks involved. And like you said, we saw that adjustment with Jameson Williams. And I feel like since Cam was really taking over the play calling, we've really seen that connection's kind of taken a level, next step going forward. And, you're seeing JMO a lot more involved in this offense. So, hopefully that could be the same deal with Tesla. But like you said, it's going to be an interesting question. Could he figure it out, as soon as this Sunday or within these next 3 games? Or is it going to be one of those instances where most likely it's going to have to be another offseason and, get that connection, really down?
It is tough to have the progression, especially that he did, because he went from being a quarterback in high school, wing T style quarterback, and then became a receiver, but that was at Hillsdale, converted receiver, played very well there, then made a huge jump from there to Arkansas. Didn't necessarily see the variety in the offense there. This was a point that someone made to me recently. They were talking about how he was kind of he was basically limited to the X position when he was at Arkansas, or limited to the Z position, I should say, limited to the slot at Arkansas. And so you don't necessarily get the full range probably at Hillsdale for sure in that offense. Then you don't get the full range at Arkansas. You didn't really learn anything from a receiving standpoint while you were in high school. And then now you're making these huge jumps. And although he's got a lot of physical traits, he's got the mental chops from what I can see here. We've interviewed him actually on the station. I interviewed him before the draft. Clearly picks up on things well, and the Lions saw that. But those are still huge jumps that if you don't have any base for the learning those different steps, it's tough to then execute it and go, okay, you know how you didn't really have a lot of groundwork for this while you were in college and high school? Now I need you to put it together against the biggest, strongest, fastest athletes in the world on the fly as the plane is going.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a surprise of the adjustment that we're seeing with him. I think the player itself, I think he's going to be fine in the long run. It's just, I feel like it'd be really nice if he could, or just someone, it doesn't necessarily even have to be him, but like, I think a lot of people look at him just because where he was drafted and all that. If just someone could emerge that third option, just with Laporta being out, like they're missing another safety blanket because, when you look at like a third and medium or a third and long, it used to be always it's going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown or Sam Laporta. And right now it just feels like it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. It could be a Jameson Williams. If they can just get that another guy, I really feel like this already good offense could really take another step even this year, which is going to get even scarier and give this Lions team even a more legitimate chance to go do something crazy.
I'm hoping that they're finding some answers here at tight end because they're shifting things around at tight end. I thought that Rucci would kind of catch on. There were some nice things said around the league about him, especially coming from the Dolphins. He seemed to be one that may have worked that didn't necessarily work out. You got Zylstra coming back into the fold. He's the one most familiar with the offense. So hopefully they can kind of cobble that together because missing basically, as you highlighted, that whole unit is a big deal, not just Laporta but Wright, and then being down Zylstra and having to sign all these guys off of different practice squads and everything. That's been tough because that's another key part for this where they're trying to learn the offense on the fly and all of that. So hopefully they can put it together for a stretch run here, but I'm excited to see what they do. Appreciate you coming on and covering them for us. I know we got to get you out of here, but make sure to tell the people where they can follow you here.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Tyler_Sawa, or you can find our podcast on wherever you get your podcasts, at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and we're also on YouTube as well on game day. So you can come join us there. And that's pretty much it. I appreciate you having me on, Ryan.
Thanks, Tyler. Appreciate it. And hopefully we'll have you back on again soon, and hopefully we get a lot more season here to work with.
Yes, sir. We'll do it.
All right. Thanks, Tyler. Take care.
Yeah. Bye-bye.